everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. My name is Jason from RetailOps. Today we have a special guest, Sam Moses, who's currently the CEO at RetailOps. But today we're actually going to go back to a past life at Dr. J's. So a few moons ago, but maybe to start it off, Sam, you can just explain kind of the profile of Dr. J's and what you guys are all about.
Yeah, for sure. So the Wayback Machine is going to be fun. Dr. J's was a retail business that was focused on urban hip hop apparel. They were really focused around a really wide assortment of inventory. We had probably 40,000 SKUs available on the website at any given time. Fairly shallow inventory, so we didn't typically buy anything less or more than 10, 15 quantity deep for our size runs. So we have a really broad inventory mix, and it turned quite a bit. So the whole point was to have the biggest assortment of urban hip hop apparel on the web in one place that we can get. Whenever I first started with them, it was 2005. They were doing about $500,000 in revenue a year. Just a kind of a startup that was the idea of the son of the owner of Dr. J's. So he said, "Hey, e-commerce is a thing. Let's go do that." His dad said, "Yeah, go ahead," and that's where it started.
Very cool. And I guess my next question would be more of a two-part question, but going way back then, in terms of the technology that you guys had in place, maybe you can walk us through what, I guess, some of the vendors you were using or some of the technologies that you were using before you came about that trigger event where it was time to really automate your operations.
Yeah, so when I first started with them, I was the first technology hire for them. As the head of technology, they were basically using a homegrown system that was built by a kid in college.
Nice.
It worked well. It was a shop cart. It did general inventory management, things of that nature, but it was really basic. They didn't need a whole lot because they were a really small business. Mm-hmm. But they were growing really quickly because they had really found a good product market fit. And so my first 6 months really were focused around how do we replace this system, because I know it's not going to withstand where they're headed.
So that was predetermined before your time there, that there was going to be a change. There wasn't some compelling event or trigger event that caused it. I guess there was before.
Yeah, well, they were growing. They were doing good business. They brought me on because they wanted to run their software in-house instead of paying for a service provider to do it for them. Mm-hmm. And so I basically took those reins. And as soon as I saw what they were running, realized very quickly, oh, wow, they need to put something else in place. This is not going to hold up for very long.
Interesting. And maybe we can go back to that buyer's journey. Typically what we see is the first step is putting a bit of a short list together of potential partners. And maybe you can go into what that short list looked like and who was on that short list.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a bit of a oh crap moment. We got to replace all of our software as we started out. And so went and looked through who was out there that was doing retail management systems and things of that nature. The short list that we came up with, especially focused around e-commerce, was Oracle, which was obviously a bit expensive, NetSuite, SAP, and at the time a company called Commercialware. Okay. Those were kind of the ones that were really pushing the envelope and understood at least something about e-commerce, where most of the traditional ERP platforms didn't really have a grasp of it at all.
I guess who was closest in terms of meeting your needs at that time? Was there can you prioritize that list?
Yeah, I would say Commercialware was probably number one, followed by NetSuite and then Oracle.
Interesting. Then in terms of getting, I guess, consensus or stakeholders bought in, typically what we see is that, it's a group of people saying, hey, we want to run in this direction. Maybe you can walk us through a bit of who those stakeholders look like at Dr. J's, meaning roles and titles and that sort of thing.
Definitely. So it was the two founders, which was the president and CEO of the company, the CFO, which was kind of a co-founder. He did a lot of the operations aspects as well. And then they had a head of buying and warehouse management. So those were the four key people in that company. Mm-hmm. And then obviously me with the technology side, I was tasked with, well, you got to figure out what we're going to do.
And then in terms of dividing kind of the influence there, who was most influential in that process? And I imagine that C-level is going to sign the agreement and make that final decision.
For sure. The CFO was the one that was really driving most of it because he had his hands pretty deep into the operations aspects.
Sure.
And he had the real material problems of, okay, well, I'm I'm getting invoices from my vendors. I need to make sure that I've got the inventory right. The cost of goods on hand has to be right. So he was the one that was really driving the majority piece of that. Whereas the CEO founder was more focused around the market, like how are we going to get this product out in the market? What marketplaces do we want to be in? How are we going to get the product to the customer?
Sure. And then in terms of, I guess, the timeline from starting that evaluation and actually making a decision, what did that look like in terms of, was it days, weeks, months? And how was that process? Was it a formal process? Was it informal where, someone just making a recommendation and the group says, yep, this is the direction we go? Is everyone participating in demos? Maybe, how did that?
Yeah, in our organization, a lot of it fell on my shoulders to do the evaluation, kind of vetting of the demos and make the recommendation because they knew there was a technology buy and they weren't technologists. So that was one of the reasons I was brought on board, was to do that evaluation and figure out what's next. And that said, a lot of it was filtered through me. It was a pretty formal process from that perspective.
Sure.
And the other piece of that,
the actual date, was it days, weeks, months?
It took anywhere from 4 to 6 months.
Oh wow, okay.
Somewhere in that ballpark.
That was
pretty lengthy. Because the systems that we were looking at were really fairly spendy, especially for a small organization like that. You were talking about an outlay of cash of at least, in some of those cases, between $250,000 to $1 million.
Okay.
So it was a big deal for the company. So it was not a decision to make lightly.
Cool. And then in terms of, the decision is made. Let's get live. Let's get some value out of this platform that we just purchased. What did that implementation look like in terms of getting up and running?
Yeah, so that was the big deciding factor. Was my thought was, well, none of these systems really hit the nail on the head. The amount of effort and time that it was looking like those implementations were going to take, anywhere from 9 to 12 months. And that was the salesperson telling us. It's like, well, we don't really have the time to wait for this, right? Especially whenever they're going to hand you off to a professional services group and you're trying to find somebody else to do the actual implementation.
So there's multiple parties,
systems
integrators.
I knew it was going to be a challenge to get it done in any material.
Did they put a project plan together, implementation plan? Like how detailed did they get in terms of saying, okay, this is the direction we're going to go with you guys?
We got pretty far down that path. So yeah, they put together a rough scope of work in terms of the time frame. But at that point, I knew that just wasn't going to be a fit for the business, and that's whenever the recommendation to the founders was, "Hey, look, guys, we can build this software in house."
That's awesome. And I guess when that decision was made, kind of walk me through a little bit of how that kind of took off. Well, what were the next? And you don't have to go into too many, for sure, technical details, but just kind of bring us into your world a little bit and how that worked.
Yeah, so the biggest thing there is just resources, right? It's okay, well, we really need to start a technology group. The way that the company was structured physically is that most of the organization, corporate headquarters, was in New York. We were based out of San Diego. So that removal kind of forced us to operate almost as two separate businesses.
Sure.
And so we really had a technology organization and we had the rest of the company. And so we were kind of that separate fork. So from that perspective, it was kind of a clean slate for us to start. And so I went at it being a technologist to begin with, from that clean slate, thinking, okay, well, I've got to build a technology team and organization here and really force that part of the company to mature. So the first thing we did was, who do I need to go build the software? Knew what we needed it to do, but it was really blank slate. How do we get started? Who do we need? So it was hire two software engineers and a web developer that was going to do a lot of the design work for us.
Interesting. And when you finally get live with the software, I guess, in terms of comparing that to the proposals that the vendors and the partners had on the table and what you guys did, I know we don't want to go into too much detail on time, money, resources, but I imagine you guys came out on top in terms of that was the way to go. That was the right decision.
Yeah, for sure. So if you look at the payroll, and we didn't go top of the heap whenever we hired our staff. We got scrappy folks that really were capable, but weren't necessarily experts in the space. Mm-hmm. We were small enough that we could take that gamble, and we got very fortunate that we got the right people and built that team appropriately. So we came in, I would say, around half the budget that the project would have cost. And that was building a full custom setup from end to end. Did everything from live model photo shoots and media management to live products on the site, warehouse management. So it did a lot of the pieces that these folks were not even really proposing to solve.
Cool. And I guess my last, two questions. It's two-part question. In terms of, a key to any project, it's really the metrics that you're tracking and how you track success. I guess going into that project, did you have success metrics defined? And then kind of backing that up at the end, what metrics, what was most impactful that you saw from the system in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't necessarily set out with, a set of metrics to begin with. It was kind of a life or death situation.
Yeah.
It was going to work or it was not going to work.
Pass
and
or
so
fail.
it was pretty black and white when it came to that. So it was whenever we launched the product and had our folks stop using the old system and going onto the new system, it was kind of an all hands on deck and make it work.
Right.
So we never really focused too much on an incremental change because of where we were at with the business. I mean, it was really a startup at that point.
Awesome. No, it's such an interesting story, compelling story. Another metric to brag for you is taking that business from $500,000 in annual revenue to $90 million.
Yeah, it didn't happen overnight, Jason, but it was about an 8-year process. But yeah, it was a really cool journey as a software person to see the evolution of the retail business really take off, the marketing efforts that they did really go, seeing the exciting times over the course of different holiday seasons and that evolution take place.
Sure. And then I guess connecting the dots to today, us sitting on this couch, end of 2018, and working for this company, RetailOps. Maybe you can connect that journey that you had at Dr. J's with where we are today.
Yeah, it's probably worth backing up a little bit and telling you a little bit about how that evolution took place. So we started out, in the early 2004-05 time frame, doing $500,000 in revenue, and then we went up to doing $90 million. By the end of my tenure there in 2011. The company evolved, obviously, right? So there was Dr. J's, there was a couple of other entities as well, DJ Premium. We started doing some brand direct websites and sales for academics and NHA and a handful of others. And so that evolution really demanded a lot out of the software group. So as a result, this wasn't just a build it, hey, it's done, and we're ready to rock. My team actually grew from that initial group of 4 folks to a team of about 30 folks. So it was a big investment. And it's interesting in hindsight, the decision that we made as an organization to own the technology in-house meant that we became a technology business, right, in addition to being a retailer. And so that investment became much bigger over time. And I think it was interesting to see that evolution and the burden that it ended up taking internally as an organization. We did have to take our focus off the customer in a lot of regards because we needed to focus on building a technology organization as well.
Right.
The interesting thing is too that at the tail end of my tenure there, this was in 2010, is whenever we really started to see some of the duct tape and Band-Aid that was put on in decisions that we made over the course of 8 years in the software development house, really start to show the signs of age. And so it was time for us to not pay back all that technical debt and keep doing fixes and patches to really meet where the business needed to go, but to make the decision to really go look at what's out there again. So in 2010, we started the process of looking for software again. Even though we were a technology business in some regards, we started taking a look. So whenever we took a look, what we found was there was not a whole lot of change, right? So commercial warehouse, Red Prairie, so they were no longer a viable option for us. There was a company called Ecometry that NetSuite was also still a big contender, obviously making a big push in the e-commerce space and retail, and Oracle was still out there. SAP was there, but still didn't really fit the bill from a process flow perspective.
Sure.
So we started a 4-month evaluation process at that point.
Interesting. I think it's really crazy how, it's 2018 and so many people who I talk to on a daily basis can relate to this story and what they go through in terms of, the landscape out there, what vendors they can partner up with and choose from. Super interesting on the back end operation side.
Yeah, the thing that really surprised me was that, and what we found was that NetSuite was the closest one. They really had embraced the concept of e-commerce, even though they are really, a financial system at the back. They didn't really solve many of the operational pains that we had, and so the decision was made to really, I propose the co-founders again. Look, we can re-architect the platform. At the end of the day, they decided, hey, we're retailers at heart. We don't want to get into the technology business, and that's really where RetailOps was born.
Right. just want to thank everyone for joining today. And we'll keep you posted on the next webinar podcast in this series. Appreciate you guys taking the time.